A woman heavy with child stands in the grey, hour before sunrise, while papers get signed behind closed doors. River boots creak on kitchen floorboards. A ferry waits at the landing. But 7-year-old eyes see everything, counting pen strokes, memorizing whispered words. She slips through shadows to wake the young master. Mule hooves thunder down foggy lanes. At the water's edge, fraudulent papers wave in morning mist. But when the baby's first cry echoes through the courthouse, a hidden seal surfaces from a family Bible, wrapped in wax that changes everything. Church bells ring across the valley. Free papers get stamped in broad daylight. When the dust settles and the crowd gathers, will a child's perfect memory be enough to break the chains forever? Or will the truth arrive too late to save 3 lives hanging in the balance? Ruth pressed her palm to the kitchen doorframe. The wood felt cool in the grey hour before sunrise. She watched Mistress Honora sign papers at the pine table while Tully Brand waited. The river agent wore boots that creaked when he shifted his weight. "She'll go quiet," Honora said. Her quill scratched twice more. "Bread for gentleness." Ruth's hand moved to her belly. 7 months now. The child stirred like it heard. Lila knelt by the butter churn, ribbon tight at her wrist. 7 years old with eyes that caught everything. She counted the mistress's pen strokes. 12. Then the river agent's thick fingers took the paper. "Ferry leaves at first light," Tully said. "Caleb's got the flatboat ready." Ruth felt the door latch click under her palm. Her legs wanted to run, but her feet stayed planted. Where could a woman heavy with child go in the dark? Bram Kersey, the overseer, stepped into the lamplight. "Bills clean?" "Clean as creek water." Tully folded the paper into his coat. "She'll bring good money downriver." The words hit Ruth like stones. Downriver meant the deep plantations, where people disappeared into cotton rows and cane fields, where babies got sold before they could walk. Lila's ribbon made a small pop as she pulled it tighter. She whispered numbers under her breath. Ferry post, wax, Clark window. Ruth recognized the pattern. The child was memorizing. "Time to walk," Tully said. Ruth stepped through the door. The grey yard stretched toward the lane that led to the river. Each footstep on the packed earth sounded too loud. Behind her, Lila's bare feet made no sound at all. At the lane's bend, Ruth turned back. The big house sat dark except for one window where lamplight still moved. The heir's room. Nathaniel had been in town for 3 days. He didn't know. Tully's hand touched her shoulder. "Move along now." The ribbon at Lila's wrist caught the last starlight as the child slipped away into the shadows between the kitchen and the big house. Lila climbed the back stairs on her belly, sliding like a snake. The boards knew her weight and stayed quiet. At the top, she pressed her ear to the heir's door, breathing, deep and steady. She turned the brass knob slow as molasses. The door opened without a sound. Inside, Nathaniel Avery lay curled under a quilt his mother had stitched before the fever took her. Lamplight from the landing touched his dark hair. "Master Nathaniel." Her voice came out like a rusty gate. He stirred but didn't wake. "Master Nathaniel." Stronger now. His eyes opened, green like bottled glass. "Lila? They took Mama." He sat up fast, quilt falling away. "Took her where?" "To the ferry. Master Tully and the overseer." Mistress signed papers. I counted 12 pen strokes and heard them say ferry post and wax and Clark window. The words tumbled out like water from a broken jar. Nathaniel swung his feet to the floor. "Say it again. All of it." Lila closed her eyes. The kitchen prayer her mama had taught her came back word for word. "Ferry leaves at first light. Caleb's got the flatboat ready. She'll bring good money downriver. 12 pen strokes, wax color, Clark window, ferry post." "You remember all that?" "Mama said remember everything. Write it in your bones." Nathaniel pulled on his boots. The leather made soft sounds in the quiet room. "Where's Moses?" "Stable. We're going to need the mule." They moved through the house like ghosts, down the back stairs, across the dog trot, past the kitchen where cold ashes waited in the hearth. The stable smell hit them first, hay and leather and the warm breath of animals. Moses Reed looked up from where he was mending bridle straps by lantern light. An old man with hands that knew horses better than people. "Young master?" "Saddle the mule, the good one. We're riding to the ferry." Moses set down his needle. "This hour? In the fog?" They took Ruth. That was enough. Moses moved to the stall where the mule stood patient as stone. The animal knew night work, had carried medicine to sick folks and brought babies into the world when the roads were too rough for wagons. "How long since they left?" Nathaniel asked Lila. She pointed to where the grey sky was starting to pale. "Before the rooster. Maybe 20 minutes. Nathaniel took the lantern from the porch hook. The flame danced yellow in the glass chimney. "You know the way. I know where Caleb keeps the flatboat." Lila climbed up behind Nathaniel on the mule. "Follow the fork to the left, past the old mill, then listen for water." Mule hooves thudded on the lane. Fog rolled in from the river thick as wool. It wrapped around them until the lantern made a small circle of light in a grey world. Somewhere ahead, a woman heavy with child walked toward a boat that would carry her away forever, unless they could reach the landing in time. The ferry landing sat at the bottom of a slope thick with willows. Fog hung over the water like smoke. Through it, Lila could see shapes moving. The flatboat creaked against the pilings. Nathaniel slid off the mule. "Stay here." "No, sir." Lila's voice was steady as creekstones. "Mama needs to see me." They picked their way down the slope. Wet grass soaked through Lila's bare feet. The river slapped against wooden pilings with a sound like hands clapping. At the water's edge, Tully stood beside Ruth. The agent had one hand on her arm. Caleb Rusk worked the boat's rope, ready to push off. "Hold there," Nathaniel called. Tully turned. His thick face showed surprise, then something harder. "Young master, you're up early. Bringing her back." "Can't do that. Papers are signed." Ruth's eyes found Leela through the fog. Mother and daughter looked at each other across 10 feet of muddy ground. Lila started to hum, low notes that seemed to come from her chest, a hymn her mama had taught her, about crossing over and going home. But the way she sang it, the notes pointed to something else. Ferry timings, river crossings, safe passages. Caleb's rope went slack in his hands. The boatman had heard that hymn before, at church gatherings and beside sickbeds. It meant something to him. "What's the girl doing?" Tully demanded. Nathaniel stepped closer. "Ruth, you want to come home?" Her voice came out like a whisper. "Yes, sir." "Then come." Tully's hand tightened on Ruth's arm. "She's sold goods now, property of Mr. Silas Creed down in Natchez. I got papers. Let me see them." Tully reached into his coat. As he pulled out the folded document, Caleb eased the flatboat back toward the pilings. The boatman's eyes stayed on Lila, who kept humming those low, sweet notes. Nathaniel looked at the papers in the weak light. "These are made out wrong. No seal from the probate court. Don't need a seal for private sale. Do for this one." Nathaniel folded the papers and handed them back. "Ruth belongs to the estate. Any sale has to go through the court." Water beaded on Ruth's cheek. Tears or fog, Lila couldn't tell. Tully's voice got harder. "Boy, you're playing with men's business." "I'm not playing." Nathaniel put his hand out to Ruth. "You're coming home." She took a step toward him. Then another. Tully's hand fell away. At the boat, Caleb shook his head. "I ain't crossing nobody that don't want to cross." "I'll remember this," Tully said. "Good," Nathaniel answered. "Remember it true." He helped Ruth up behind him on the mule. Lila climbed on last, her arms around her mama's waist. As they climbed away from the river, the fog began to thin. Somewhere behind them, water lapped against empty pilings. The plantation porch stretched across the front of the big house, like a stage. White-painted boards and tall columns that caught the first light. Nathaniel stopped the mule at the bottom of the steps. Field hands were coming in from the quarters for morning work. Yard servants moved around the side of the house carrying buckets and brooms. Word had already spread. Something was happening at the big house. Bram Kersey stood at the top of the porch steps. The overseer's face was red as clay. His boots made sharp sounds on the painted boards. "What's this?" Bram demanded. Nathaniel helped Ruth down from the mule. She stood beside him with Lila at her side. "This is my declaring Ruth and her children family." Murmurs rippled through the gathering crowd. Moses came up from the stable. Dinah the cook stepped out of the kitchen. Even some of the field hands stopped their walking to listen. "Family?" Bram's voice cracked like a whip. "Boy, you don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Nathaniel's voice carried in the morning air. "She and her children are under my protection. They'll be sheltered as kin." Ruth's hand found Lila's. Mother and daughter stood straight as fence posts. The mistress sold her legal, Bram said. Papers are signed. Papers aren't worth the ink if they're not proper. Nathaniel looked around at all the faces. I'm telling you, before witnesses, Ruth is family. Lila is family, and the child to come is family. The debt will be settled legal, through the court. Bram came down 2 steps. His hand rested on the whip at his belt. Your daddy might have stood for this foolishness, but he's dead. That's right, he's dead, and I'm the heir. Nathaniel turned to face the crowd. All of you heard me. This woman and her children are family. Anyone who troubles them, troubles me. The field hands nodded. The yard servants smiled small smiles. Even Moses touched his hat brim like a salute. But Bram's jaw worked like he was chewing leather. We'll see what the clerk says about family and papers and proper seals. He stomped down the steps and passed them toward the lane. At the bend, he turned back. This ain't over. No, Nathaniel agreed. It's not. He offered Ruth his arm. Come inside. You're home. The front door of the big house opened. Ruth walked through it with Lila beside her. The crowd watched until the door closed. Then they went back to their work, but differently. Like something had changed that couldn't be unchanged. The plantation ledger lay open on the parlor table. Pages and pages of columns in different hands, some in the old master's careful script, some in Bram's heavy scrawl, some in Mistress Honora's feminine loops. Lila ran her finger down the numbers while Moses kept watch at the window. Her mama rested upstairs in the room that had been Nathaniel's mother's sewing room. Look here, Lila said. Nathaniel leaned over her shoulder. What do you see? Same date, same amount, 2 times. She pointed to entries from last month. See, September 15th, $300. Then down here, September 15th, $300 again. Could be 2 different sales. No, sir. Look at the note. Lila read the tiny words written beside the numbers. Ruth, breeding stock. Both times. Nathaniel's breath caught. They sold her twice. On paper. That's cheating. That's fraud. He looked closer at the columns. What else do you see? Lila's finger moved down the page. Here, October 1st, $500 to Silas Creer, debt payment. But look, no bill of sale. No receipt, so Cree gets paid, but there's no record of what for. Mama's sale was supposed to cover that debt. But if they counted her twice, Lila's voice trailed off as understanding hit. They made it look like the estate owed more than it did. Nathaniel straightened. The sale was fraud from the start. Moses turned from the window. Riders coming. 3 of them. Through the glass, they could see Bram with 2 men in dark coats. One was Tully. The other looked like Law. Tear out those pages, Nathaniel said. We'll need them at the courthouse. Lila carefully removed 2 sheets from the ledger. The paper made a soft, ripping sound. She folded them small and handed them to Nathaniel, who tucked them inside his coat. Moses, hitch the wagon. We're going to town. What about Mama? Lila asked. She stays here. Safe. Nathaniel looked out at the approaching riders. We've got papers to show a clerk. Outside, hooves drummed on the lane. Men's voices rose harsh in the morning air. But inside the parlor, a little girl had found numbers that didn't add up right, and sometimes that was enough to change everything. The courthouse sat on the town square like a gray stone hen, 2 stories with narrow windows and steps worn smooth by years of boots. At the side, a smaller building held the clerk's office. Ezra Pike looked up from his desk when Nathaniel and Lila walked in. The probate clerk was a thin man with ink stains on his fingers and wire spectacles that caught the light. Young Master Avery, what brings you to town? Need to file some papers. About the estate. Ezra set down his pen. What sort of papers? Nathaniel pulled out the ledger pages. Evidence of fraud, double entries and false debt. The clerk put on his spectacles and studied the numbers. His finger traced the columns while his lips moved silently. After a long time, he looked up. These show irregular bookkeeping, but I can't act on ledger entries alone. What do you need? Sealed authority, or a proper codicil from your father's will. I'm the heir. You're a young man without legal standing until the estate clears probate. Ezra handed back the papers. Without the proper seals, my hands are tied. Lila had been studying the ribbons that hung beside the clerk's desk. Each one marked a different filing. Different colors of wax sealed different types of documents. That color, she said, pointing to a blue-green ribbon. That's on our Bible at home. Ezra followed her gaze. That's my personal seal. I use it for witnessed blessings and marriage bonds. You came to the plantation once, Lila said, when Mama got her blessing from the old master. I remember the color. The clerk's eyebrows rose. When was this? 2 years ago. Master said some words over Mama. You made wax marks on a paper. Nathaniel felt something stir in his memory. His father had indeed called the clerk to the house. There had been some sort of ceremony on the porch. He'd been away at school and hadn't thought much of it. What kind of blessing? He asked. Ezra cleaned his spectacles carefully. Sometimes masters make arrangements for loyal servants, provisions for their care. Would that be in the family Bible? If it was recorded proper, yes. Then I need to check the Bible. If you find anything with my seal and color, bring it back. Ezra dipped his pen in ink. But mind, the seal has to match exact color, impression, and initial marks. Lila tugged on Nathaniel's sleeve. The wax color's important? Very important, like a signature that can't be forged. Outside, the courthouse bell was striking noon. Somewhere back at the plantation, Ruth waited in the sewing room, not knowing whether papers and seals and clerk's marks would keep her family together. But Lila remembered blue-green wax pressed into soft paper, and sometimes a child's memory was the strongest chain that bound past to present. The family Bible sat heavy as a gravestone on the parlor table, black leather cover worn smooth by generations of hands. Nathaniel opened it careful, like it might break apart. Where would he write something? He asked. Lila climbed onto a chair beside him. Mama said, look in the margins, where there's space around the words. They turned pages slow, birth dates and death dates in the front, wedding records. Then the scripture pages, thick with tiny print and narrow borders. Here, Lila whispered. In the margin beside Leviticus, someone had written in careful script, Ruth blessed this day before witnesses, her children born after this blessing to be free by intent. Ring and seal to match Clark's mark, October 15th, 1851, J. A. The initials were their father's. The date was 2 years ago. There, Nathaniel's finger traced the words, Father made a provision. But what's this about a ring? Lila pointed to a small fleck of blue-green wax pressed into the page corner. That's the Clark's color. And see, there's marks in the wax. Nathaniel held the page to the lamplight. In the wax impression, he could make out the faint outline of a signet ring, lines and curves that formed letters or a symbol. We need to find that ring. Master kept his rings in the bedroom. In the wooden box, they climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. The room still smelled of pipe tobacco and bay rum. On the dresser, a carved wooden box held collar studs and cufflinks, and 3 rings. 2 were simple gold bands. The third had a face carved with intricate marks, a signet ring for sealing documents. Nathaniel held it up to the lamp. This could be it, but how do we prove it matches? Press it in fresh wax, Lila said. See if it makes the same marks. From the kitchen, Nathaniel brought a candle and a small piece of sealing wax. He warmed the wax over the flame until it went soft. Then he pressed the ring face into it. The impression showed clear lines, a family initial surrounded by small symbols. When he held it next to the margin wax, the patterns matched exactly. That's it, Lila breathed. That's the ring that made the mark. Thunder rolled outside. The afternoon storm was building. Rain would make the roads muddy and travel hard, but they had what they needed now. A margin note that spoke of freedom, a ring that matched the seal, and a child who remembered every detail she had ever seen or heard. Rain drummed on the roof like impatient fingers. In the kitchen, Dinah helped Ruth walk slow circles around the table. The baby was restless today. Ruth's back ached fierce. Child's getting ready, Dinah said. Maybe another week or two. Too soon. Ruth gripped the table edge. I need to be free first. Legal free. Before this baby comes into the world. Lila burst through the door with Nathaniel behind her. Both were soaked from the rain. We found it, Lila said. The writing in the Bible. About your blessing. Ruth straightened. What blessing? Nathaniel showed her the page. Father wrote it in the margin. Any child born after your blessing ceremony would be free by intent. I remember that day, Ruth said slowly. Master called me to the porch, said words over me like a prayer, but I didn't know. The clerk was there. He sealed it proper. Nathaniel held up the ring. This matches his wax mark. Outside, lightning turned the windows white. Thunder came right after, rattling the glass. Storm's getting worse, Dinah said. Roads will be pure mud. We can't wait, Nathaniel replied. Soon as the rain slows, we're going to town. The clerk needs to see this. Ruth sat heavily in a chair. Her hand moved to her belly. What if the baby comes while you're gone? Then I'll be here, Dinah said. Been catching babies for 20 years. And I'll be back soon as possible, Nathaniel promised, with papers that say you're free, legal free. But the storm showed no sign of stopping. Rain fell in sheets across the yard. The lane would be a river of mud by now, and somewhere out there, Bram was probably planning his next move. Ruth closed her eyes and felt the child turn inside her. This baby would come soon. Whether into freedom or bondage depended on a trip to town through a storm that might wash out every bridge between here and the courthouse. The church basement smelled of old wood and candle wax. Reverend? Josiah had opened it as shelter when the storm grew fierce. Now families huddled around oil lamps while rain pounded overhead. Dinah had brought Ruth here when the pain started. Just twinges, but steady. The baby was thinking about coming early. Breathe deep, Dinah whispered. Let the pain roll through you like water. In the corner, Leela explored old trunks full of church records, baptism certificates and wedding documents, funeral notices written in careful hands. Look at this, she called softly. Nathaniel came over to where she knelt beside an open trunk. Inside, more ledgers. But these belonged to the church, not the plantation. What is it? Wedding records. Look here. Lila pointed to an entry from 2 years ago. Ruth given in blessing to the protection of the Avery house. Witnessed by Reverend Josiah and sealed by Ezra Pike, probate clerk. The record was official, signed and dated, with a perfect impression of the same blue-green wax they'd found in the Bible margin. This proves the ceremony really happened, Nathaniel said. The church has it on record. Another pain hit Ruth. She gripped Dinah's hand until her knuckles went white. How long between them now? About 10 minutes. Still got time. Reverend Josiah came over to check on them. A young man with kind eyes and hands that knew hard work. Storm's easing some, but the bridge at Miller's Creek is out. Water's too high. We need to get to town, Nathaniel said. To the clerk. Not tonight. Maybe tomorrow if the water drops. Ruth's breath came short. The baby won't wait for bridges. Lila looked up from the church records. What if we bring the clerk here? Instead of going to him? How? Moses knows the old deer paths, the ones that cross the creek upstream where it's shallow. Nathaniel considered this. Would Moses try it in this weather? For Mama, Moses would try anything. Outside, lightning still flickered, but the thunder was farther away. The storm was moving south. Maybe by morning the water would be down enough for a man on a good horse to make it through. Ruth breathed through another pain. Stronger this time. The baby was coming whether they had legal papers or not. But maybe, if Moses could reach town, the papers would be here when the child arrived. Moses wrapped oilcloth around the leather pouch that held the Bible page and church record. The old stable hand's face was grim as winter sky. Creek's running high, he said, but I know where the rocks are. The rain had stopped, but the air hung thick with moisture. Every leaf dripped. The ground squelched under their feet. You sure about this? Nathaniel asked. Moses checked the buckles on his horse's bridle. Miss Ruth's been good to me. Her little girl too. Time I did something good for them. He swung up into the saddle. The horse stepped careful on the muddy ground. Good mountain stock that knew how to pick its way across rough country. Tell the clerk it's urgent, Nathaniel said. Tell him a child's coming and we need the papers before it arrives. I'll tell him. Moses touched his hat brim and turned the horse toward the lane. They watched until the fog swallowed him up. Back in the church basement, Ruth's pains were coming closer. 7 minutes now, 8 at the most. Dinah had spread clean blankets on a bench against the wall. Babies decided to come tonight, she said, ready or not. Lila sat beside her mama and hummed low hymns. The same songs that had quieted the dogs and softened the boatman's heart. Now they helped Ruth breathe steady through the building panes. Reverend Josiah kept the oil lamps burning and the water hot. He'd seen births before, knew when to help and when to stay back. "Tell me about the blessing again," Ruth whispered during a lull between pains. Nathaniel opened the Bible to the margin note. "Father wrote that any child born after your blessing ceremony would be free by intent. That means this baby, if it comes tonight, is born free, but only if the papers prove it legal. Moses will get them." Another pain hit. Ruth gripped Lila's hand and breathed deep. Through the basement window, they could see the first grey light of dawn touching the sky. Somewhere out there, an old man on a good horse was crossing a flooded creek, carrying papers that would decide whether a child came into the world free or bound. Ezra Pike's house sat behind the courthouse like an afterthought. Moses knocked on the door as the sun climbed over the trees. His clothes dripped creek water. His horse stood steam-breathing in the yard. The clerk opened the door in his nightshirt and spectacles. "Moses? What in blazes?" "Baby coming. Miss Ruth's baby. They need papers." Moses handed over the oilcloth pouch. Inside, the Bible page and church record had stayed dry. Ezra read them careful in the lamplight. "This is the blessing I recorded," he said, 2 years ago. "But I need to verify the seal and ring match. They got the ring back at the church. Young master brought it. I'll need to see it. Make the comparison proper." Ezra dressed quick and gathered his official seals and papers. The ride back took longer. The creek had risen another foot since Moses crossed. The horse had to swim part way, with both men clinging to the saddle, but they made it, muddy and cold but carrying what they needed. At the church, Ruth's pains came every 4 minutes now. Dinah had hot water ready and clean cloths. Everything was prepared except the papers. "Let me see the ring," Ezra said. Nathaniel showed him the signet. The clerk examined it close, then pressed it into fresh wax. He compared the impression to the margin note and the church record. "Perfect match," he announced. "This is the ring that sealed both documents," Ruth cried out. The pain was fierce now. "Almost time. Is my baby free?" she gasped. Ezra looked at the documents again. "Read the margin note word for word. According to this provision, yes. Any child born after the blessing ceremony is free by your master's intent. Can you make it official? Right now, if you want." He spread a clean paper on the altar, dipped his pen in ink. While Ruth labored on the makeshift bed, Ezra wrote out a certificate of freedom for the child about to be born. "What's the baby's name?" he asked. Ruth smiled through her pain. "If it's a girl, I want to call her Mercy." Ezra wrote the name careful in his best script. Then he pressed his seal into blue-green wax at the bottom, the same color that had marked Ruth's blessing 2 years before. The baby came as the sun reached its peak. A girl, just as Ruth had hoped. Small but strong, with lungs that worked fine. She announced herself to the world with a cry that echoed through the church basement. "Mercy," Ruth whispered, holding her daughter close. "Born free." Ezra finished the legal papers while Dinah cleaned the baby and made sure everything was proper. The certificate bore his official seal and signature. It declared that Mercy, daughter of Ruth, was born free according to the provisions made by her late master. "That makes it legal?" Nathaniel asked. "Legal as Sunday," Ezra confirmed. "This child is free-born, can't be sold or bound." Lila touched her new sister's tiny fist. "She's perfect. She's free," Ruth said. That word meant everything. More than perfect, more than beautiful. Free. Outside, they heard horses coming. Fast hoofbeats on muddy ground. Through the basement window, they could see Bram with a group of men. Some wore the clothes of patrollers. Others looked like the rough sort who worked for creditors. "They're coming for us," Ruth said. "They're too late," Ezra replied. "Baby's born and papers are signed. Nothing they can do about that." But Bram's face through the window looked like a man who didn't much care about papers. His hand rested on his whip. The men with him carried rope. A runner banged on the church door. "Clerk's away," he called. "Public reading moved to tomorrow noon." Ezra looked confused. "I'm right here," Nathaniel understood first. "They're saying you're not here, so they can claim the papers aren't valid." Through the window, they watched Bram point toward the church. His men spread out around the building. The trap was closing. But inside, a baby born free slept in her mother's arms. And sometimes that was enough to change the world, even if the world didn't want to change. The storm had passed but left the world soaked and dangerous. At Dinah's cabin, Ruth rested on the narrow bed while baby Mercy slept beside her. The midwife kept watch from her rocking chair. Lila sat by the window, braiding her ribbon tight around her wrist. Outside, shadows moved wrong in the grey afternoon light. Men on horses. "Too many of them. They're coming," she whispered. Dinah looked out through the herb bundles hanging in the window. Bram rode with 6 men now. Some she recognized as patrollers. Others were strangers with hard faces. "Where's the clerk?" one of them called. "Gone home sick," Bram lied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Can't do any official business today." Ruth struggled to sit up. "They mean to take us." "Not while I breathe," Dinah said. But she was one old woman against 7 men. The cabin door shook under heavy knocks. "Open up. We got legal right." "What legal right?" Dinah called back. "Sale papers, signed and proper." Lila pressed, her face to the window. She could see Tully among the men. The river agent held a document that looked official in the fading light. "Those papers are fraud," Ruth said. "Don't matter if there's no clerk to say so." Bram's voice came through the door. The latch rattled. Someone was working it with a knife. In moments they'd be inside. Lila grabbed the lantern from the table. "I know another way." "Where?" "Follow the hymn." She started humming those low notes that had worked magic at the river, the song that spoke of crossings and safe passages. But this time the melody pointed to the back of the cabin where a loose board opened onto the root cellar. Ruth clutched baby Mercy close and followed Lila through the narrow opening. Dinah came last, pulling the board shut just as the front door burst open. "Where are they?" Bram's boots stomped across the cabin floor. "Gone to ground like rabbits," Tully said. "Can't have gone far with a newborn." But the root cellar connected to old storm drains that ran under the quarters. Lila knew every inch of those tunnels. Her mama had taught her the paths when she was tiny, places to hide when the world got dangerous. They crawled through darkness with baby Mercy making no sound at all, as if she knew her life depended on silence. Behind them, men's voices grew fainter. Ahead lay the ferry landing and whatever hope they could find there. The tunnel opened near the old mill foundation. Lila poked her head out careful, listening for hoofbeats. Nothing but the sound of water running high in the creek. "Coast is clear," she whispered. They climbed out into the grey evening. Ruth moved slow, still weak from birthing. Baby Mercy stayed quiet against her chest. "Which way?" Ruth asked. Lila pointed toward the ferry landing. "Moses said he'd wait there if things went wrong." They picked their way through the trees. Every shadow could hide a rider. Every sound might be dogs on their trail. But Lila's feet found the path even in the dim light. Behind them, men's voices echoed through the quarters. "Check the cabins. Look under every bed." "They got dogs," Ruth said. Lila heard them too. The deep baying of tracking hounds. Getting closer. At the ferry landing, Moses waited with the mule. The old stable hand's face showed relief when he saw them coming. "Figured they'd try something," he said. Got the boat ready. But as they approached the landing, lantern light bobbed through the trees. The searchers had picked up their trail. "Dogs will follow us across the water," Ruth said. "Not if they follow something else first," Lila replied. She took the lantern from Moses and started back toward the tree line. Her voice rose in the ferry hymn, but this time she sang it different. The notes spoke of false crossings and wrong turns, of paths that led nowhere. The dogs heard her singing and turned toward the sound. Their baying changed pitch as they followed the decoy trail, away from the landing, away from the water. Moses poled the flatboat into the current. On the far shore, they could see lights at the courthouse. Maybe safety, maybe just another trap. But behind them, the dogs had lost the scent, and sometimes that was miracle enough. The courthouse square lay empty, except for one wagon near the clerk's office. As they climbed up from the river landing, Nathaniel saw Tully loading papers into a strongbox. "Stop right there," Nathaniel called. Tully turned. His thick face showed surprise. "Thought you were still at the plantation." "Thought wrong." Nathaniel helped Ruth down from the boat. "Those papers you're loading, they wouldn't be forged sale documents, would they? Bills are legal, signed by the rightful owner. Let me see them." Tully hesitated, then handed over a document. Nathaniel read it by lantern light. The paper looked official until you studied the details. "Wrong seal," he said. And the clerk's signature is spelled wrong. E-Z-R-A, not E-Z-E-R. Lila pointed to the wax mark. That's not the right color either. Should be blue-green. That's yellow. A new voice cut through the night air. Bring the clerk, or this is all wind. Silas Cree stepped into the lamplight. The creditor was a tall man with iron-grey hair and eyes like winter sky. His coat was fine wool. His boots were polished leather. Everything about him said money and power. Mr. Creer, Tooley said, we got a problem here. I can see that. Silas looked at Ruth and the baby. This the breeding stock you were supposed to deliver? She claims freedom papers. Claims are cheap. Where's the clerk to verify them? Moses pointed toward the office building. He's right there. Through the window, they could see Ezra at his desk. The clerk had hidden himself inside when the patrollers came looking. Now he watched the confrontation from behind the glass. Get him out here, Silas demanded. Can't force a man to work when he's not ready, Nathaniel replied. Then we'll settle this ourselves, Silas signaled to his men. Load them in the wagon. But baby Mercy chose that moment to cry. The sound cut through the night like a bell. Clear and strong and free. The sound of a child who had been born into liberty. Even Silas paused at that cry, as if something in him remembered what freedom sounded like. The creek had turned into a river. Brown water rushed where the bridge used to be. On the far side, more lanterns moved through the trees. The searchers had reached town by the long road. Bridge is out, Moses said. We're trapped. But Ezra had heard the baby crying. The clerk opened his office door and called across the square. Bring those papers here. All of them. Time to settle this proper. About time, Silas muttered. They gathered in the clerk's office. Documents spread across the desk like a hand of cards. Sale papers and birth certificates. Ledger pages and church records. The family ring gleaming in the lamplight. Let me see the margin note, Ezra said. Nathaniel opened the Bible to the right page. The blue-green wax caught the light. Beside it, the careful script that granted freedom to any child born after Ruth's blessing. Ezra pressed the ring into fresh wax. The impression matched perfect. Every line and curve identical. This is authentic, he announced. The provision is legal. But the debt, Silas began. Look at the ledger, Lila interrupted. She pointed to the double entries. Same date, same amount, 2 times. That's fraud. Ezra studied the numbers. His finger traced the columns while his mind did the mathematics. You're right. The sale was counted twice. Once as property transferred, once as debt payment. Meaning? Meaning the estate doesn't owe what you claim, Mr. Creer. The original debt was satisfied by legal means. Silas's face went dark as storm clouds. Those are just bookkeeping errors. No, sir. That's deliberate fraud. Ezra dipped his pen in ink. I'm voiding the sale papers and entering the birth certificate into the permanent record. Baby Mercy slept through it all. Born free and staying free, no matter what men with money and power might want. Outside, the floodwater was starting to drop. Soon the roads would be passable again. But inside the clerk's office, a different kind of flood had already changed everything. Dawn came grey and muddy. The courthouse steps were slick with dew and river silt, but folks had gathered anyway. Word travelled fast in a small town, even after a flood. Ezra climbed the steps, carrying a leather satchel full of documents. Behind him came Nathaniel with Ruth and Lila. Baby Mercy stayed wrapped warm against the morning chill. What's all this about? Someone called from the crowd. Legal matter, Ezra replied. Freedom papers and fraudulent sales. More people arrived, storekeepers and farmers, church folks and river workers, even some of the plantation families from upstream. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Bram pushed through the crowd with Tully beside him. The overseer's face was red with anger. This is all foolishness. Sale papers were legal. We'll see about that, Ezra said. He spread the documents on a wooden table someone had brought from the courthouse. The Bible lay open to show the margin note. Beside it, the church records and ledger pages. 2 years ago, Ezra announced loud enough for all to hear, the late Master Avery made provision for his servant Ruth. Any child born after a blessing ceremony would be free by his declared intent. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others frowned. Freedom provisions weren't common, but they weren't unknown either. Furthermore, Ezra continued, Recent sale papers were forged, wrong seals, wrong signatures, and fraudulent bookkeeping. He held up Tully's documents beside his own official seal. Even from a distance, people could see the differences. "So what's that mean?" a farmer called. "Means the child born yesterday is freeborn, can't be sold or bound." Ruth clutched Lila's hand. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. Silas Cree stepped forward. "I got investment to protect, legal contracts." "Based on fraud," Nathaniel replied. "Investment in stolen goods isn't legal." The crowd pressed closer. This was better than a court trial, real drama happening right in front of them. Ezra lifted the ring toward the light. Seal must match, before witnesses. Fresh wax gleamed on the wooden table. Ezra warmed it with a candle flame until it went soft enough for a clear impression. Around the courthouse steps, the crowd held its breath. Nathaniel handed over the signet ring, his father's ring with the family crest carved deep into the metal face. "This ring sealed the original blessing," Ezra announced. "If it matches the wax in the Bible margin, the provision stands." He pressed the ring into the warm wax. The impression came out clean and sharp. Every detail of the carved crest showed clear. Beside him, the Bible lay open to the margin note with its blue-green wax seal. Ezra held the new impression next to the old one. "Perfect match," he said. "Same ring, same seal, same authority." From the back of the crowd, Caleb Rusk stepped forward. The old boatman held his cap in weathered hands. "I seen that blessing ceremony." 2 years passed. Was there when the master spoke words over Ruth? "What kind of words?" Ezra asked. "Said she was under his protection, said her children would be provided for. Had me and the preacher witness it proper." More nods from the crowd. Caleb was known as an honest man. If he said it happened, it happened. Silas tried one more time. "Debts still stand. Sale papers are legal contracts." Ezra opened the ledger to the pages Lila had marked. "Look here. Same date, same amount, counted twice. That's not a legal contract. That's fraud." The crowd could see the double entries for themselves. Numbers didn't lie, even when men did. "Sales void," Ezra declared. "Based on fraudulent debt calculation." Bram's hand moved toward his whip. "This ain't over." "Yes, it is," Nathaniel said, quiet but firm. "It's over." From the crowd, Reverend Josiah's voice rose clear. "Sometimes the Lord works through ledger books and wax seals. Sometimes through the memory of children and the courage of young men." People nodded. They'd seen something important happen here, something that would be talked about for years. Baby Mercy stirred in Ruth's arms and made a small sound, the sound of a free child waking up to a free world. Ezra spread the ledger pages across the wooden table. Numbers and dates in different handwriting told the story clear as daylight. The crowd pressed closer to see. "Here's the fraud," Ezra pointed to the September entries. Ruth Sale recorded twice. September 15th, $300 to Silas Krieg. Then again, same date, same amount, same purpose. Lila stepped up to the table. "And here," she said, showing another page, "October 1st, $500 debt payment to Mr. Krieg." But no record of what was sold to cover it. "So they counted Ruth's sale as covering both debts," Nathaniel explained to the crowd. "Made the estate look like it owed more than it did." Silas's face went pale as creekstones. "Those are just bookkeeping errors." "No, sir," Ezra replied. "This is deliberate double counting, fraud against the estate," the crowd murmured. Folks understood being cheated, even if the mathematics got complicated. "What's that mean for the sale?" someone called. "Means the sale is void. Based on false debt calculation." Ezra dipped his pen in ink. "I'm entering the voiding into permanent record." Bram stepped forward, with his jaw tight as a trap. "Then I'll burn the cursed book myself." He lunged for the Bible, but Lila moved between them. Her small body blocked his path to the table. "No, sir," she said, steady as creekstones. "That book belongs to my family now." "Your family?" Bram's voice cracked like a whip. "Mama's family, my family, the baby's family." Lila's voice carried clear across the courthouse yard. "Master Nathaniel said so before witnesses." The crowd remembered. They'd heard about the porch declaration. Word traveled fast in plantation country. Bram's hand fell away from the Bible. Something in the child's steady gaze stopped him cold. Reverend Josiah stepped through the crowd. The young preacher's voice rose clear in the morning air. I witnessed that blessing ceremony 2 years past, saw the master speak protective words over Ruth, saw the clerk seal it proper. What exactly did he say? Ezra asked. Said Ruth was under his family's protection. Said her children would be provided for according to his Christian duty. The preacher looked around the crowd. Said it before God and witnesses. Bram's face went red as clay. Preachers got no business in legal matters. Got every business when oaths are involved, Reverend. Josiah replied. Man's word given before witnesses is sacred. Lila started humming again, those low, sweet notes that had quieted dogs and softened hearts. The hymn about crossing over and finding safe harbor. The crowd listened. Even Bram seemed caught by the melody. The anger drained out of his face as the child sang. That's the hymn she sang at the river. Someone whispered. Same tune. And at the church last night, another voice added, helped calm the birthing pains. The song worked its quiet magic again. Tempers cooled, hearts opened. The courthouse yard felt less like a battleground and more like a church. When Lila finished, silence stretched between them. Then Ezra lifted his official stamp. By record and seal, he announced. Hear this declaration. The crowd pressed closer. This was the moment everything turned on. Ezra's voice carried clear across the courthouse yard. By the authority vested in me as probate clerk of this county, I hereby enter into permanent record the following. He held up the first document. Birth certificate for Mercy, daughter of Ruth. Born free according to the provisions made by her late master. Approving murmurs from the crowd. A free birth was something to celebrate. Second, Ezra continued, the margin provision in the Avery family Bible is authenticated by matching ring and seal, legal and binding. He showed the wax impressions side by side. Even those in the back could see they matched perfect. Third, the attempted sale of Ruth was based on fraudulent debt calculation, double entries and false accounting, therefore void. The ledger pages fluttered in the morning breeze, numbers that told the truth at last. Fourth and final, the forged sale papers presented by Tully Brand are declared null. Wrong seals, wrong signatures, wrong authority. Tully shifted uncomfortably as all eyes turned his way. A man caught in fraud before the whole town. Ezra picked up his official seal and pressed it into red wax at the bottom of a clean document. These rulings are entered into permanent record, stamped and sealed this day before witnesses. Ruth clutched Lila's hand as thunder rumbled far off. But this time, it was just weather. The real storm had passed. What's that mean exactly? A farmer called. Means Ruth and her children are free, legal and permanent. Ezra rolled the document and tied it with a blue ribbon. Can't be sold or bound, now or ever. The crowd broke into scattered applause. Justice done in broad daylight was a fine thing to see. Baby Mercy chose that moment to cry again. A strong, healthy sound that echoed off the courthouse walls. The cry of a child born free and staying free. Silas Krieg stood silent for a long moment. The creditor's iron-grey hair caught the morning light. His face showed the lines of a man used to getting his way. I won't fight God's weather nor a clerk's seal, he said finally. But this sets a dangerous precedent. Truth usually does, Nathaniel replied. Silas looked at Ruth holding her baby, at Lila standing straight as a fence post, at the crowd of witnesses who'd seen justice done proper. I withdraw my claims, he announced. All debts between my house and the Avery estate are settled. The crowd let out a collective breath. The crisis was over. Furthermore, Silas continued, surprising everyone, I'll speak against any who try to trouble this family in future. My word on it. Reverend Josiah smiled. Sometimes the hardest hearts crack open when they see truth plain. From the church on the hill, bells began to ring. Someone had spread word to the bell ringer. The sound rolled across the town like water. Sounds like celebration to me, Ezra said. People turned toward the church road. The formal business was done, but the real celebration would happen where it should, in God's house, with the whole community watching. Ruth looked down at baby Mercy sleeping in her arms. She'll grow up free, she whispered. Free and protected, Nathaniel promised. Family protects family. The courthouse crowd began to break up. Folks headed toward the church, where the bells kept ringing. Justice was fine, but joy was better. And today, they'd seen both. The small country chapel sat on a rise above the river, white boards and a simple steeple, nothing fancy, but solid and true. The bells kept ringing as people climbed the hill. Inside, Dinah had prepared everything for the birth ceremony. Clean blankets and steaming herbs. The scent of chamomile and lavender filled the small space. Ruth lay on a pallet near the altar, not because she was sick, but because this was where blessings happened, where new life got welcomed proper into the world. Labor went easy, Dinah said. Baby came ready to breathe free air. Lila sat beside her mama humming lullabies, simple tunes that spoke of safety and home. Her ribbon was still tight at her wrist, but somehow it looked less like worry and more like promise. Nathaniel knelt beside them. I want to say something official. Before all these witnesses, the chapel had filled with people from town, farmers and storekeepers, river folks and church families, all come to see the free baby and hear what needed saying. Reverend Josiah stood at the simple altar. What would you like to declare? Nathaniel's voice carried clear through the small building. I'm establishing a household charter. Ruth, Lila, and baby Mercy are family under my name and protection. Legal family? Someone asked. Family in every way that matters. Blood and choice and Christian duty. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. Good tears this time. The kind that came with joy instead of sorrow. Her name? Reverend Josiah asked, looking at the baby. Mercy, Ruth said, strong and clear. Mercy Avery. The preacher lifted the child toward the light streaming through the chapel windows. Mercy Avery, born free on this day, welcomed into the family of God and the protection of earthly kin. Baby Mercy opened her eyes for the first time, dark eyes that seemed to see everything. The future spreading out before her like a clean page waiting to be written. Ezra arrived as the blessing ceremony ended. The clerk carried the ribboned decree that made everything official, legal and binding in the eyes of law and heaven. Where should this go? He asked. Chapel door, Reverend, Josiah replied, where everyone can see it. They gathered on the chapel steps as Ezra pinned the document to the wooden door. Blue ribbon fluttered in the afternoon breeze. The wax seal caught the sunlight. Read it out loud, someone called. Ezra cleared his throat. By the authority of the probate court and witnessed by this community, be it known that Ruth and her children are acknowledged as family under the protection of Nathaniel Avery, born free and staying free. So recorded and sealed, this day. Applause rippled through the crowd. Real justice was something worth celebrating. Lila looked at her ribbon, still tied tight at her wrist. The same ribbon she'd knotted when the world seemed dark and dangerous. Now everything had changed. Slowly, she untied the ribbon from her wrist. The thin strip of fabric had held her memories and hopes through the darkest hours. Now, it could hold something better. She walked to the chapel rail and tied the ribbon there, a promise made solid, family bonds that couldn't be broken by sales or debts or fraudulent papers. What's that for? Nathaniel asked. So I remember, Lila said. So everyone remembers. We're family now. Ruth clutched baby Mercy close. The child slept peaceful in her mother's arms. Born free under an open sky with witnesses and blessings and legal papers, all saying the same thing. The crowd began to drift away, back to their own families and their own lives, but they carried the story with them. About a pregnant slave sold in secret, about an heir who took her in and called her family, about a little girl whose sharp eyes and perfect memory had helped save them all. On the chapel steps, 4 people stood together as the sun set over the river, Nathaniel and Ruth and Lila and baby Mercy. Not the family any of them had planned for, but the family they'd chosen. The lantern by the chapel door cast steady light as evening fell, a small flame that would burn all night, keeping watch over a family that had been scattered and was now whole. Born free and staying free, under the open sky where everyone could see. Sometimes the most important miracles happen in daylight, with witnesses and papers and the simple courage to call strangers family.